Hi peeps, happy Tuesday. I hope you are doing well. For those of you who are logging on in the mornings and saying hi and popping into our morning meetings, and for those of you who are doing your job, I appreciate you so much. You're working so hard and it just makes me so proud to be your teacher. So thank you to those who are doing that. Without further ado, we're going to go back to our book. So make sure you have, as always, your orange booklet with you. And the other sheets that came along with it. For those of you who answered the question yesterday about the book, good job, good reading, good listening. Today we're going to be reading chapter 7 and 8. Chapter 7 is a bit longer, but chapter 8 was shorter, so I wanted to pair them together. So just as a recap in our brain to refresh it, remember yesterday we learned about the people in the cave. We learned about Dimitri giving everyone jobs. We learned about how the cave is like through a maze. There's so many passageways that they could go to. And then we learned about Daniel, and that's Anton's new friend. And we learned about Daniel and his parents, or we didn't learn anything about his dad, went to the war to fight in the war, but then his mom and sister got taken away, and we kind of assume that they were taken to a concentration camp. Oof, and they became friends. So here we go, chapter 7 from that. Let me get my nifty glasses on. Here we go. After the first few days in the cave, a sort of weird boredom set in. At night, the men ventured out and returned several times with buckets of water, which were transferred to barrels in the cavern. During the day, a little sunlight crept into the cave's entrance, but Anton noticed that it didn't really penetrate the darkness or the gloom. Everyone tried to keep busy, but there wasn't much they could do without risking discovery. The children couldn't play loud games, the women cooked only during the day so no passerby would notice the light of the stove. Anton and Daniel kept watch each night, but they didn't see anything suspicious. Yet Anton knew the Germans had overrun the countryside. Patrols were everywhere, Dimitri said. He and Sergei had gone to the river to gather water and had nearly been caught twice. But Anton and Daniel never saw anyone anywhere near the entrance to the cave. On the fourth day, Dimitri called them to his side. I have a mission for the two of you, he said. Anton grew excited, but tried not to show it. How may we help you, Uncle, he said. Our nightly excursions are becoming more dangerous. Last night we were nearly captured yet again. A squad of Gestapo followed us, but we lost them in the woods. We led them away from the cave, so it took us twice as long to return. We had to dump out the water we were carrying so we could travel faster. He stared solemnly at each boy. The danger is becoming too great for us. So tonight, while we're out, I want the two of you to explore the cave. Elsa and some of the other women will keep watch. What are we looking for? Daniel asked. A good question, Daniel, Dimitri said, placing his hand on the boy's shoulders. Two things, Dimitri said. The first is to find out if any of the cave's passageways lead to an underground spring. If we can find water sourced in the cave, we will not have to venture out each night. Second, look for another way out of this cave. We need an escape hatch. If we are discovered, if the Gestapo should come here, we must have a way to flee. He handed a flashlight and a canteen to Anton and a small bag of bread and fruit to Daniel. I thought you said the passageways were full of twists and turns. How will we keep from becoming lost? Anton said. Dimitri handed him a rock. It felt soft and chalky in his hand. Use the rock to mark your way. This limestone will leave a visible line on the rock, like chalk. Draw an arrow every 50 steps. If you become lost, you will follow them back to the main cavern. Any questions? Anton and Daniel shook their heads, understanding what was required of them. We'll go now, Anton said. No time like the present. Good. Be careful. Don't take any unnecessary chances. Don't forget that this cave can be dangerous. Anton flicked on the flashlight and Dimitri checked his pocket watch. Go as far as you can in 1 hour, then turn back. If you do not return in 2 hours, someone will come looking for you. Dmitri placed the watch in Anton's hand and left them, returning to the group, warming themselves by the stove. Well, shall we? Anton said. I guess, Daniel said. I do not like the dark. I would rather we were hiding in the treetops than in these underground caves. Anton knew that Daniel was still worried about his mother and sister. He didn't want his new friend to have anything else to fret over. It will be fine. We're safe here, Anton said. We are not safe anywhere, Daniel muttered as they entered one of the passageways. Anton had no answer for that. A few meters down the path, the ceiling got lower, and they had to hunch over to continue, so they had to hunch over their back in order to not hit the ceiling. But after about 50 meters, the cave widened again, and they could stand up straight. So far, the path had not split from the main tunnel, but every 50 steps, they dutifully marked the walls, drawing an arrow pointing toward the main cavern. Anton watched Daniel take cautious steps along the path. It was almost as though Daniel thought that if they could just be silent enough, nothing bad could happen to them. He was nervous, and his breath came in gasps, so he was like... Anton wanted to help him relax, but couldn't think of a way to do it. After another 75 meters, they came to a fork in the passageway, so meaning there were different paths to take. Which way? Anton asked. He shone the light down both pathways, but it revealed nothing of promise in either direction. Let's go to the right. But since we'll have to come back and explore the other direction anyway, it really makes no difference, Daniel said. They headed to the right and followed the passageway for several meters, marking their way and keeping track of the time. 25 minutes had passed. As they walked farther down the tunnel, Anton observed that the cave was growing damper. Look, he said, rubbing his fingers over the slick rock walls. Water! I wonder where it's coming from. It could be water seeping in from the ground above, Daniel said. Because remember, there's the grass ground, and underneath them is the cave. And if you remember, Uncle Dmitri said you need to find water, and you need to find a way out. So maybe they found water. Perhaps, Anton said, but he was excited at the prospect. It might be a spring, or perhaps they might find an underground creek. Anton stopped at the driest spot he could find and marked the wall with an arrow. A few meters farther on, the passage narrowed and they had to walk single file. Then it narrowed further, so they had to turn sideways to move forward. Perhaps we should turn back, Daniel suggested. I would much prefer it. Turning back would be good, I think. Anton tried not to chuckle at Daniel's discomfort, but it was difficult, and with the walls as wet as they were, Anton thought giving up now would be a mistake. They could be so close to water that would solve all of their problems. Why don't I go just a little bit farther? If I don't find anything, we'll head back. Daniel was about to agree when a noise stopped in his tracks. Did you hear that? Anton asked. What is it? Water dripping, I think. It's coming from up ahead. I have to find out for sure. But the passage is too narrow, Daniel said. Well, I think I can make it. I don't think that's a good idea, Anton. Oh, don't worry. It will be fine. You have to wait here. Keep an eye out on the watch. I will try to make it as far as I can. Call out to me in 15 minutes. If I haven't found anything by then, I'll come back. Anton knew Daniel did not approve, but he couldn't let that bother him now. They needed water to live. The ceiling was so low he needed to drop to his hands and knees. He began to crawl, and soon Daniel was out of sight. As Anton scurried along, the sound of the water grew to a steady drip. Now both the walls and floor of the cave were covered in moisture, and the water had to be coming from somewhere. Anton pushed ahead, and as the passageway opened back up, he hopped back to his feet, which were soaked. The water was 2 or 3 centimeters deep. Drip, drip, drip. Anton pointed the flashlight upward and saw where the water was coming from. His heart sank. The ceiling above him was a collection of small rocks and boulders held in place by mud and dirt. Water from the recent rains had worked its way in between the rocks and dripped into the cave from above. There was no spring here, no creek. Anton shone the light over the rocks, wondering if their group could collect enough water here to satisfy their needs. Not a chance, he thought. Even if they could manage to get their buckets through the narrow tunnel, they'd never fill them fast enough. It had been raining the past few days, and this runoff from the storms wouldn't last a day. "Anton!" Daniel's shout startled him. Anton had forgotten all about the time. He could hear how anxious his friend was. "It has been 15 minutes. Are you okay?" Daniel's voice echoed off the cave walls. "Yes, I'm fine," Anton said. "I'll be back with you in a moment." But first, he had to do one more thing. Their mission was to find a water source, but they were also supposed to be looking for an exit. He reached up to one of the boulders above him and pushed. At first, nothing happened. But then he heard the sound of rock sliding on rock. The boulder came loose from the ceiling and nearly fell on top of him. With all his strength, Anton pushed it to the side. But once one was dislodged, the others came crashing down on him. "Daniel!" He could not get the words out of his mouth before another large rock fell from the ceiling and slammed into his shoulder, driving him to his knees. And that was just the beginning. Rock after rock pelted after every part of his body. He tried to shout in alarm, but the words caught in his throat. His flashlight was knocked from his hand and it skittered away, leaving him in darkness. This was bad. Very bad. Uncle Dmitri would never trust him with responsibility again. The crush of that realization seemed more than Anton could bear. And then a rock the size of a melon grazed the side of his head. He remembered nothing else. Ooh, cliffhanger. All right, pause my video right here. Think about a chapter title. And maybe in your head, make a prediction what you think will happen in chapter 8, which I'm about to read right now. But right now, pause if you need it. Fill out that part in your orange booklet, and then come back and read with me. Chapter 8. So now we're going to go back to Major Von Dusen. This is going to be in his point of view, and we're going to see where they're at right now. Major Von Dusen stood in the back of the half-track, his eyes roaming the countryside. It was nearing midnight, and the waxing crescent moon gave off just enough light that they could run the vehicle without headlights. The engine did make some noise, but the darkness still gave them a small advantage over their place. Light traveled farther than sound. Those they hunted would not hear the engine until the Germans were too close for them to escape. Von Dusen was frustrated. He knew there were Jews hiding in the area, but they had gone to ground, and they had hidden themselves really well. For the last 3 nights, he had returned from patrol empty-handed, but the Reich's extensive records show that there were still a number of people unaccounted for. At first, he was certain that sympathizers were hiding the remaining Jewish families, but he and his squad had searched dozens of farmhouses, shops, and even the homes of Gentiles he suspected of defying the Reich by hiding Jews from the Gestapo. Each time he had come up empty. There had been rumors. He had heard whispers from his informants that a large group of Jews was hidden somewhere near the small village of Borta. Each night, he and his men would search the tiny hamlet, then work outward, circling like a shark around a reef. Simile. Yet they continually failed to find their prey. Tonight, he had taken a different approach. The day had begun the same as those before. His team searched the obvious hiding places: abandoned barns, a deserted church, farms owned by suspected sympathizers, but none of them were hiding Jews. Karl had always assumed that fear of the Gestapo would force the Juden to make mistakes. They might cower in their hiding places now, but soon they would crack, and his unit would be waiting to catch them. As the Führer had taught his followers, that's Hitler, Jews were feeble and slow-witted, unworthy of standing in the shadow of the master race. Major Von Dusen would not allow the travesty of their invasion to continue. But where were they? All day he had studied the map and surveillance photos of the surrounding area. The map was 5 years old, but it was the most recent one of the area they could find. It did not include some of the newer farms, but it marked all the roads and rivers. He had pored over it in recent days, memorizing every field and every pond. What was he missing? Water, he murmured. A thought had suddenly occurred to him. Major? His sergeant asked him. Von Dusen did not answer immediately. He was thinking. If the Jews had been hidden by a Gentile farmer, they'd have had access to a well. But anyone who didn't have that kind of help, anyone hiding out in the wilderness of the countryside, they would need to be near a lake, stream, or spring. These Jews might have been able to stash enough food to stay alive for weeks or months in their hiding places, but they could not live without water. "Halten," he ordered. The private driving the half-track brake to a stop, so that means halt in German, or stop. Von Dusen pulled a map from his pocket. He jumped out, spread open the map on the hood of the vehicle, and switched on his flashlight. The 3 other men of his squad crowded around him. He found the village of Borta. It was logical to assume that those in hiding would remain close to the village. Even if they had stores of food, they would eventually run out. The closer they were to places where they knew they might replenish their supplies, the less time they would have to be out in the open where they might be caught. They knew this area. Why flee to somewhere unfamiliar? Von Dusen's finger traced over the wrinkled paper. North of the village was a small stream. It was isolated. There were some open fields and farmlands around it, but the stream itself ran through a wooded area that would provide a good cover. There were no houses close by, and so it was unlikely that anyone creeping along that part of the stream would be spotted. The Jews must be hiding somewhere within walking distance of this place. Von Dusen yelled to his men, "Hurry!" They scrambled back into the half-track and turned it around. Von Dusen's driver went as fast as he dared with the headlights off. Remember, the moon was shining really bright, so that's how they could see. The vehicle bounced over the rough terrain. If they were not careful, they would overturn. But in Von Dusen's mind, there was no time to waste. When they emerged from the fields and turned onto a dirt road, the major finally exhaled. A half hour later, they had reached their destination. Von Dusen ordered his men to take up their weapons. Von Dusen yelled, "Fast! We must be fast!" he thought. He was sure he would find what he was looking for here. His men grabbed their machine guns and followed him toward the trees at a brisk trot. Von Dusen's eyes scanned the horizon. "Halten," he whispered, holding his hand up in his fist. Hold. He'd seen something move in the trees ahead. 2 men scurried through them, carrying large milk cans mounted on a wooden staff between them. Their silhouettes were barely visible, but the longer he watched, the more sure he became. He had found the Jews he was looking for. Now, Major Von Dusen had a decision to make. Should he take these men prisoner and interrogate them until they revealed where the others were hiding, or should he follow them? If he tracked them back to their hiding place, he might capture the entire group of Jews. He had only a moment to decide before he lost the men in the darkness. Capturing a large number of Jews would surely win him favor with General Steuben. If you remember, he's trying to impress this guy because he wants to become something higher than he is right now, a higher rank. A medal he would for sure get, perhaps even a promotion. He might become the youngest lieutenant colonel in the Gestapo. He motioned for his squad to follow, and they quietly shadowed the 2 men. For now, he would trail them. It was the easier of the 2 options, but if they noticed, he would capture them, question them, and break them. They would reveal the location of their camp. He smiled in the darkness. No matter what happened, Major Karl von Dusen of the would not return to headquarters tonight empty-handed. Okay, that's the end of chapter 8, unfortunately. I want you to write down a chapter title for chapter 8 in your orange booklet. And I want you to go to Google Classroom because you are going to tell me your prediction. Who do you think the 2 men that Major Von Dusen found? And you're going to tell me your prediction of what happened to Anton. What's he up to? How is he doing? So make sure you go to Google Classroom and answer those questions for today. And we will tune in Thursday to find out what happened to Anton and what Major Von Dusen does to those 2 men. All right, peeps. Hopefully I see you tomorrow. Remember, it is middle school day, so we're going to be interviewing the middle school teachers and some middle school students. So hopefully you tune in for that, and I will see you then. Bye.